was a quiet Tuesday evening at Rosie's Diner, the kind of place where the coffee's always hot and the jukebox hums with songs of the 1960s. Sarah Turner sat across from her husband Jack in their favorite corner booth, the one with the cracked red vinyl that felt like home. The air smelled of fried onions and apple pie, and outside the upstate New York sunset painted the sky in shades of amber. Sarah, 67 years old, her silver hair pulled into a loose bun, watched Jack cut into his meatloaf with the same precision he'd used for 30 years at the factory. But something caught her eye, a faint pulse beneath the skin of his forearm, where a jagged scar had lived for decades. It wasn't just a scar anymore. It seemed to twitch, like a heartbeat under the surface. Her fork froze midair. "Jack, what's that on your arm?" she asked, her voice soft but sharp. He glanced down, shrugged, and pulled his sleeve lower. "Just an old war wound, Sarah. Nothing new." But his eyes, those steady blue eyes, flickered with something she hadn't seen in years. Fear. Jack Turner, 68 years old, 6 feet tall, and still broad-shouldered despite the years, had always been a man of few words. A Vietnam veteran who'd served with the 82nd Airborne, he'd come home in 1972, traded his uniform for a factory job, and built a life with Sarah in the small town of Willow Creek, New York. Their home, a modest two-story with peeling white paint, sat a mile from Seneca Lake, close enough to hear the water lapping on windy nights. Sarah, a retired librarian, had spent her days organizing books and her evenings tending to their garden, where roses bloomed even in October's chill. They'd raised one daughter, Emily, now a trauma nurse in Rochester, 3 hours away. Life was simple, steady like the rhythm of the lake's waves. But that scar on Jack's arm, the one he'd always called a souvenir from Vietnam, was changing. It had grown darker, raised, almost alive. Sarah's heart tightened as she watched him avoid her gaze, his fork scraping the plate with forced calm. "Honey, it looks different," Sarah pressed, leaning forward. The diner's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows on Jack's face, highlighting the lines etched by years of hard work. "It's fine," he said, his voice gruff but gentle. "Had it checked years ago. Just a scar." Sarah didn't buy it. She'd known Jack for 45 years, married for 43. She could read the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when he was hiding something. Jack never complained, not about the arthritis in his hands, not about the nightmares that sometimes woke him, and certainly not about his health. But this was different. The scar's edges were irregular, almost crawling, like a map redrawn by time. Sarah reached across the table, her fingers brushing his sleeve. "Let me see it, Jack." He pulled back slightly, then sighed. Sleeve. The scar, once a thin white line, was now a raised mottled patch, pulsing faintly. Sarah's breath caught. "We're calling Emily tonight," she said firmly. Their daughter, Emily, 39 years old, had inherited her father's stubborn streak and her mother's sharp mind. A trauma nurse with a no-nonsense edge, she'd drifted from Jack after her divorce 5 years ago, his disapproval creating a quiet rift. But Sarah knew Emily's medical instincts would kick in. That evening, in their cozy living room with its faded floral curtains, Sarah dialed Emily's number. Jack sat in his recliner, pretending to watch a football game, but his eyes kept drifting to his arm. Emily's voice crackled through the speaker. "Mom, what's going on?" "It's your dad," Sarah said, glancing at Jack. "There's a scar on his arm. It's changing. Looks strange. Like it's moving." Emily's tone shifted, clinical and urgent. "Dad, when did you last have it checked?" Jack grunted. 1985. Doc said it was nothing. Emily didn't hesitate. "You're going to a doctor tomorrow. I'm driving down this weekend to make sure." The next morning, Sarah drove Jack to Willow Creek's only clinic, a brick building that smelled of antiseptic and old magazines. Dr. Henry Larson, their family doctor for 20 years, was a kind man in his late 70s, his glasses perpetually sliding down his nose. He examined Jack's arm with a frown, his fingers tracing the scar's uneven edges. "This isn't a typical scar anymore, Jack," he said, adjusting his glasses. "It's developed into a growth. Could be benign, could be something else. I'm referring you to Dr. Claire Evans, a dermatologist in Syracuse. She's top-notch." Jack's face remained stoic, but Sarah saw his hands clench. "How soon can we see her?" she asked. "Dr. Larson scribbled a referral. I'll call her office myself. You'll be in by Friday." As they left the clinic, Jack stared out the car window at the autumn leaves swirling across the road. "It's nothing, Sarah," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. That night, Sarah lay awake, the moonlight filtering through their bedroom window. Jack's steady breathing beside her felt like a lie. Too calm for the storm she sensed brewing. She thought back to their early years, when Jack would wake gasping from nightmares he never explained. He'd always brushed off questions about Vietnam, saying, "No sense digging up the past." But now, that past seemed to be digging itself up, clawing its way out through his skin. Sarah's own memories stirred, images she'd buried deep, of humid nights in Vietnam, bandaging soldiers as a Red Cross volunteer. She'd never told Jack, not wanting to reopen wounds, have to face her own secrets too. Sometimes the smallest signs hold the biggest truths, waiting for us to notice. Friday came too fast, the kind of day where the sky hangs heavy with gray clouds promising rain that never falls. Sarah drove Jack the 45 miles to Syracuse, the silence in their old pickup truck thick with unspoken worries. Jack, 68 years old, sat rigid, his calloused hands gripping his knees, the strange scar on his forearm hidden beneath a flannel sleeve. Sarah, her silver hair catching the dim light, kept her eyes on the road, but her mind on that pulsing mark. It wasn't just a scar anymore. It was a question, one Jack wasn't answering. At Dr. Claire Evans's clinic, a modern glass building that felt out of place in their small-town world, they waited in a sleek room with pale blue walls. Jack flipped through a fishing magazine, his fingers tense, while Sarah's thoughts drifted to Vietnam, to nights spent bandaging soldiers under flickering lanterns. She'd been 22, a Red Cross volunteer, seeing things she'd never shared, not even with Jack. The weight of that silence pressed on her now. Dr. Claire Evans, 36 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, with sharp green eyes behind rimless glasses, greeted them with a warm but professional smile. "Mr. Turner, Mrs. Turner, let's take a look." Jack rolled up his sleeve, revealing the growth, darker now, with jagged edges that seemed to shift under the clinic's bright lights. Dr. Evans's smile faltered for a split second. "How long has it been like this?" she asked, her gloved hands hovering over the scar. "Since Vietnam," Jack said gruffly. "Started changing maybe 6 months ago." Sarah added, "It's gotten worse this week. Looks like it's moving sometimes." Dr. Evans raised an eyebrow but didn't dismiss it. "Any pain or warmth?" Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Feels warm, sometimes itches." She examined it closely, her face unreadable. "I'd like to do a biopsy today. We need to know what we're dealing with." The biopsy was quick but tense. Jack winced as the needle numbed his arm, and Sarah held his other hand, her heart racing. Dr. Evans worked with steady precision, extracting a small sample of the growth. "The tissue was denser than I expected," she murmured, placing it in a sterile container. "I'm taking a second sample for good measure." As she did, she frowned, her eyes narrowing. "There's something metallic embedded here." Sarah's breath caught, her mind flashing to shrapnel wounds she'd seen in Vietnam, soldiers with fragments buried so deep they didn't know until years later. Jack's face stayed blank, but his grip on Sarah's hand tightened. Dr. Evans labeled the samples. "We'll rush these to the lab. Results in 48 hours. Keep the area clean. Call me if it worsens. Here's my cell number." Sarah nodded, but Jack's silence felt heavier than the drive home. Back in Willow Creek, Sarah couldn't shake the image of that metallic glint. That evening, their old friend Mike Delaney stopped by, his boots crunching on the gravel drive. Mike, 69 years old, wiry and weathered, was Jack's war buddy from the 82nd Airborne. He'd settled in nearby Elmwood running a hardware store. "Heard you're having some trouble, Jack," Mike said, settling onto their sagging porch swing. "News travels fast," Jack muttered, sipping a beer. Mike's eyes flicked to Jack's arm. "Show me." Jack hesitated, then rolled up his sleeve. Mike's face paled. "Looks like what Peterson had. Remember him? Radio guy from our unit." Jack nodded slowly. "Died in '92. Weird cancer. Started as scar." Mike leaned forward, voice low. "He said it felt alive, Jack, like it moved." Sarah's heart sank, her Red Cross days flooding back, patients with scars that hid more than metal. Mike's words hung in the air, stirring memories Jack had buried. In 1971, near Da Nang, their unit had been ordered to clear a village. The intelligence was wrong. No enemy, just scared civilians. Their Lieutenant Robert Klein, a hot-headed officer with a taste for control, insisted on aggressive searches. Jack had defied him, stopping a reckless act that could have ended in bloodshed. In the chaos, a shot rang out, Klein's pistol, grazing Jack's arm. The official report called it enemy fire, a lie to protect Klein, who was quietly discharged. Jack, Mike, and two others swore to silence, carrying the truth like a wound. Now that truth seemed to be surfacing through Jack's skin. Mike looked at Sarah, his eyes heavy. "Some things from that war never left us, Sarah. Jack's scar. It's like it's waking up." Sarah lay awake that night, Jack's steady snores beside her a fragile comfort. Her own secret gnawed at her. She'd seen cover-ups like Jack's in Vietnam, soldiers patched up with shrapnel left inside to avoid paperwork. As a Red Cross volunteer, she'd bandage men whose wounds held secrets. But she'd locked those memories away when she became a librarian, choosing stories over scars. Now Jack's growth felt like a bridge between their hidden pasts. She thought of calling Emily but hesitated. Her daughter didn't know about her Vietnam days. The phone rang at midnight, jarring her. It was Dr. Evans. "Mrs. Turner, the preliminary results are in. Can you and Jack come in tomorrow? It's urgent." Sarah's stomach twisted. "What did you find?" A pause. "The sample contains abnormal cells and a metallic fragment. We need to discuss next steps." The next morning, Sarah and Jack sat in Dr. Evans' office, the air thick with tension. "The biopsy shows a growth with unique characteristics," Dr. Evans said, her voice calm but serious. "It's not typical melanoma, and the metallic object complicates things. Likely shrapnel from Vietnam." Jack's face hardened, but he said nothing. Sarah spoke up. "He was wounded in 1971. Never talked about it." Dr. Evans nodded. "I've consulted Dr. Nathan Cole, an oncologist. We recommend surgical removal as soon as possible." Jack finally spoke, his voice flat. "Is it cancer?" "We don't know yet," Dr. Evans said, "but it's behaving unusually. We've scheduled surgery for Monday." Sarah's mind raced. Her Red Cross training told her this wasn't just medical, it was personal, tied to a war they'd both survived but never discussed. As they drove home, rain finally fell, streaking the windshield. Jack stared out, his silence louder than the storm. Sarah reached for his hand. "Jack, we need to talk about Vietnam." He shook his head. "Not now, Sarah. Let's just get through this." But Sarah saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear she'd seen in soldiers decades ago. Her own secret burned in her chest. Should she tell him about her time in Vietnam? Would it help him face whatever was growing inside him? The growth strange pulsing, Mike's story about Peterson, and Dr. Evans' urgency all pointed to something bigger than a medical mystery. It was as if Jack's past was fighting to be seen, and Sarah's was clawing his way up too. We carry our past like shadows, afraid to let them see the light. Monday morning arrived with a chill that cut through Willow Creek, the kind of cold that settled into your bones. Sarah stood by Jack's hospital bed in Syracuse, her hands clasped tightly, watching as nurses prepped him for surgery. Jack, 68 years old, lay still, his broad shoulders tense under the thin hospital gown. The strange scar on his forearm, now a raised, pulsing growth, seemed to mock the sterile room's calm. Sarah's heart pounded, her mind drifting to 1969, to humid Vietnam nights where she'd stitched up soldiers with wounds that hid secrets. She'd never told Jack about those days, just as he'd never shared the truth behind his scar. Now, as the anesthesiologist checked monitors, Sarah wondered if their silences had led them here, to this moment where the past was literally breaking through Jack's skin. Dr. Claire Evans entered, her green eyes sharp with focus. "Mr. Turner, we're ready to begin. The goal is to remove the growth and the metallic object intact." Jack nodded, his jaw tight. "Just get it out, Doc." Sarah squeezed his hand, her voice steady despite her fear. "I'll be right here, Jack." He met her eyes, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through his stoic mask. "Don't worry, Sarah, I've been through worse." But his words felt hollow, and Sarah saw the same fear she'd glimpsed at Rosie's diner. As they wheeled him away, she sank into a chair in the waiting area, the hum of the hospital amplifying her unease. Emily arrived, her trauma nurse instincts in overdrive. "Mom, he'll be okay. Dr. Evans is the best." Sarah nodded, but her thoughts were in Vietnam, with soldiers whose scars held more than metal. In the surgical suite, Dr. Evans worked with precision, her scalpel tracing the growths, irregular edges. Dr. Nathan Cole, the oncologist, assisted, his silver hair glinting under the bright lights. Blood pressure steady at 110/70, the anesthesiologist called out. Dr. Evans nodded, her focus absolute. "The growth is more complex than the imaging suggested," she said, her voice low. "It's got fibrous extensions like roots spreading into the muscle." Dr. Cole leaned closer, his magnification loops catching the light. "Almost like it's anchoring itself. Look at the vascularity. It's got its own blood supply." Nurse Karen Mitchell, a 20-year veteran with steady hands, adjusted the overhead lamp. "Dr. Evans, the tissue is pulsing with his heartbeat. See it?" Sarah, watching through the observation window, caught the shift in the team's posture, tension, curiosity, something unspoken. As Dr. Evans dissected deeper, she paused, her forceps hovering. "There's the metallic object. It's not shrapnel, it's a bullet fragment." The room stilled, the only sound the steady beep of monitors. Dr. Cole's eyes narrowed. Not enemy fire. The shape and corrosion suggest American ammunition, maybe from the early 70s. Dr. Evans carefully freed the fragment, a twisted piece of metal, 1 centimeter long, its surface pitted but unmistakable. Nurse Mitchell gasped, her composure slipping. "My God, it's like the tissue was built around it." The growth seemed to shift, collapsing slightly, then tightening as if reacting to the bullet's removal. Sarah's breath caught, her Red Cross memories flooding back, soldiers with wounds that seemed alive, defying medical logic. She pressed her hands against the glass, her wedding ring glinting, a silent prayer forming. Dr. Evans placed the bullet fragment in a sterile container, her voice calm but urgent. "I want this analyzed immediately. Full metallurgy and toxicology. The tissue's behavior is unprecedented. It's like it was protecting the fragment or using it." Dr. Cole nodded, his scientific curiosity piqued. "The growth structures suggest it was neutralizing something toxic. We need to test for chemical agents." Sarah's mind raced. Chemical agents? She'd heard whispers in Vietnam about experimental weapons, substances that caused strange reactions in soldiers' bodies. Had Jack been exposed to something like that? Her own past as a volunteer, patching up men with unexplainable symptoms, felt too close now. She wanted to tell Dr. Evans, to share what she'd seen, but fear held her back. Would it help Jack, or just expose her own buried wounds? The surgery stretched on, hours marked by the waiting room clock's relentless tick. Emily sat beside Sarah, her phone buzzing with work updates she ignored. "Mom, what's really going on with you? You've been distant since this started." Sarah hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of her purse. "I'm just worried, Emily, that's all." But Emily's sharp gaze, so like Jack's, saw through her. "You're holding something back, I can tell." Sarah looked away, her memories of Vietnam clawing at her, blood-soaked bandages, soldiers crying out orders to keep quiet about certain injuries. She'd buried that life to become the librarian, the wife, the mother. But now, Jack's surgery was unearthing it all. A nurse appeared, interrupting her thoughts. "Mrs. Turner, Dr. Evans needs to speak with you. It's urgent." In the consultation room, Dr. Evans' face was a mix of fatigue and fascination. "We've removed the growth and the bullet fragment," she said, placing a sealed container on the table. The metal glinted through the plastic, an ugly relic of war. "But there's something else. Preliminary tests on the fragment show traces of an unknown chemical compound, possibly linked to experimental agents used in Vietnam." Sarah's heart sank, her Red Cross days confirming her worst fears. "Jack's stable, but his condition's fragile. The growth was containing the toxin. Removing it may have triggered an immune response we don't fully understand." Sarah's voice trembled. "Is he in danger?" Dr. Evans met her eyes. "We're monitoring him closely, but we need more information about his Vietnam service. Anything you can share could help." Sarah's mind reeled. She knew things, chemical exposures, hushed-up experiments, but admitting it meant exposing her own past. Jack had never known she was in Vietnam, tending to men like him. Should she tell Dr. Evans now, risk unraveling their life's carefully built facade? Jack's words from the diner echoed, "Just an old war wound." But it wasn't just a wound. It was a piece of a war they'd both survived, a war that had marked them in ways they'd never shared. As Sarah left the room, Emily's hand on her shoulder felt like an anchor. "Mom, whatever you're not saying, it's time. Jack needs you to be honest." Sarah nodded, tears stinging her eyes. The truth was rising, like that pulsing scar, and it wouldn't stay buried any longer. The body can hide secrets even from itself, but they always find a way out. The hospital's ICU felt like a frozen world where time slowed to the rhythm of beeping monitors and the whoosh of ventilators. Sarah stood by Jack's bed, her 67-year-old hands trembling as she watched his chest rise and fall, mechanical and unnatural. Jack, 68 years old, lay unconscious, his face pale under the harsh lights, the surgical site on his forearm, bandaged but ominously swollen. Tubes snaked from his body, tethering him to machines that fought to keep him alive. Sarah's heart ached, her mind tangled with guilt. She'd pushed for the surgery, but had it unleashed something worse? Her Red Cross days in Vietnam haunted her, memories of soldiers with wounds that defied healing, their bodies reacting to unseen poisons. She hadn't told Jack about that life, just as he'd hidden the truth of his scar. Now, with him slipping away, those silences felt like betrayals. Dr. Claire Evans appeared, her green eyes shadowed with exhaustion. "Mrs. Turner, we're dealing with an aggressive infection at the surgical site. It's not responding to standard antibiotics." Sarah's breath caught. "What's causing it?" Dr. Evans hesitated, choosing her words. "The growth was neutralizing a toxin from the bullet fragment, likely a chemical agent. Removing it disrupted a balance Jack's body had maintained for decades. We've found traces of a compound similar to Agent Orange, but with unusual properties, possibly experimental." Sarah's stomach twisted. She'd heard rumors in Vietnam, whispers of secret chemicals tested on soldiers, injuries hushed up to avoid scandal. Dr. Nathan Cole joined them, his voice grave. "We're starting a new antibiotic cocktail, but the next 24 hours are critical." Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on Jack, willing him to fight. That night, unable to stay still, Sarah slipped into Jack's workshop behind their Willow Creek home. The smell of sawdust and oil enveloped her, a reminder of Jack's steady presence. She found the metal box he'd mentioned, hidden under his workbench, its lock clicking open with her birthday, April 22, 1948. Inside was a sealed envelope, his neat handwriting spelling her name. Her hand shook as she opened it, revealing a letter dated 15 years ago. "My dearest Sarah," it began, "if you're reading this, I'm gone, or I've finally told you the truth about Vietnam. In 1971, I stopped Lieutenant Klein from harming civilians. His pistol fired, and the bullet lodged in my arm. It was American, not enemy fire. I kept it secret to protect my unit, but it's been a weight I've carried alone. I'm sorry I couldn't share it with you." Sarah's tears fell, blurring the words. Jack's scar wasn't just a wound. It was evidence of his courage, his shame, his silence. Sarah returned to the hospital at dawn, the letter folded in her purse. Emily met her in the ICU waiting room, her face etched with worry. "Mom, how's Dad?" "Stable, but critical," Sarah said, her voice breaking. Emily hugged her tightly. "You look like you haven't slept. What's going on?" Sarah took a deep breath, the weight of her secret pressing hard. "Emily, I need to tell you something. Before I was a librarian, I was a Red Cross volunteer in Vietnam. I treated soldiers with strange wounds, some like your father's, possibly from chemical exposures. I never told him." Emily's eyes widened. "Why not?" Sarah looked away, her voice soft. "I wanted to leave that war behind, but now I think it might help the doctors." Emily nodded, her hand on Sarah's arm. "Then tell them, Mom, for Dad." In Dr. Evans's office, Sarah recounted her Vietnam experiences: soldiers with wounds that pulsed, infections that resisted treatment, whispers of experimental chemicals. Bullet may have altered Jack's immune system, creating a unique response. Your knowledge of those cases suggests a rare adaptation to toxic exposure. We're adjusting his treatment to support his immune system through this shock. Sarah's heart lifted slightly. Will it save him? Dr. Evans's eyes were steady. It gives us a fighting chance. Back at Jack's bedside, Sarah saw his eyelids flutter. His hand gripped hers weakly, his voice a raspy whisper through the ventilator. "Tell the truth, Sarah." Her throat tightened. "I will, Jack. I promise." The revelation of Sarah's past felt like a dam breaking. She told Dr. Cole about the chemical exposures she'd witnessed, the soldiers whose bodies fought unknown toxins. The doctors adjusted Jack's treatment, targeting the infection with a new approach based on her insights. By evening, his fever dropped slightly, a flicker of hope in the sterile gloom. Emily sat with Sarah, their hands clasped. "You did the right thing, Mom," Emily said. "Dad's a fighter. He'll pull through." Sarah nodded, but her thoughts were on the letter, on Jack's confession of stopping Klein to save lives. Their secrets had built walls, but now those walls were crumbling. As she watched Jack's chest rise and fall, Sarah vowed to share her full story when he woke. No more hiding. Truth can be a heavy burden, but sharing it can lighten the load. The ICU's sterile hum had become a strange comfort by the third day, its rhythm marking Jack's stubborn fight. Sarah sat by his bed, her 67-year-old hands steady now, holding his as the monitors beeped softly. Jack, 68 years old, was still pale, but his fever had dropped to 101 degrees, and the ventilator's settings had been lowered. The infection was retreating, thanks to Sarah's insights about chemical exposures from her Red Cross days in Vietnam. Dr. Claire Evans had called it a breakthrough, the adjusted treatment targeting the unique immune response Jack's body had built around the bullet fragment. Sarah's confession, her hidden past as a volunteer, had shifted something, not just in Jack's treatment, but in her own heart. For 43 years, she'd buried that part of herself, but now, with Jack fighting for his life, she felt a clarity she hadn't known was possible. Dr. Evans stopped by, her green eyes bright despite the long hours. "Mrs. Turner, the latest labs are promising. The infection's losing ground, and Jack's vital signs are stabilizing." Sarah exhaled, relief washing over her. "And the chemical in the bullet?" Dr. Evans nodded, her voice measured. "We've sent samples to the VA for analysis. It's not just Agent Orange. There's a synthetic compound we haven't identified. Your information about Vietnam exposures helped us connect the dots. This could impact other veterans." Sarah glanced at Jack, his chest rising steadily. If it helps others, he'd want that. Dr. Evans smiled faintly. "We'll need your permission to share his case anonymously." Sarah nodded. "Do it." Jack's eyes fluttered open, catching hers. His hand squeezed weakly, a silent acknowledgment of her strength. That afternoon, Jack was strong enough to be weaned off the ventilator. His voice, raspy from days of intubation, broke the silence. "Sarah, you were in Vietnam?" She nodded, tears welling. "I was a Red Cross volunteer, Jack. I saw things, wounds like yours, soldiers exposed to chemicals. I never told you because I wanted to forget." Jack's blue eyes, still sharp despite his weakness, held hers. "I kept things from you, too. That bullet wasn't just a wound. It was from Klein's pistol when I stopped him. Sarah took his hand, her voice soft. I read your letter. You saved lives, Jack. You carried that truth alone for too long. He looked away, his jaw tight. Thought I was protecting you, protecting us. Sarah leaned closer. We're stronger when we share the weight. No more secrets, okay? Jack nodded, a tear escaping. No more secrets. Emily joined them, her trauma-nursed demeanor softening as she saw her father awake. Dad, you scared us, she said, her voice catching. Jack managed a weak smile. Tougher than I look, kid. Emily glanced at Sarah, then back at Jack. Mom told me about Vietnam, both of you. Why didn't you ever say anything? Jack sighed, his gaze distant. When I came home, people either spit on us or pitied us. I just wanted to be Jack Turner, the guy who married your mom, not some broken vet. Emily's eyes softened. You're not broken, Dad. You're the strongest man I know. Sarah watched them, the rift between father and daughter widened by years of silence and her divorce, healing in that quiet moment. Emily's hand found Jack's, a bridge rebuilt. Later, Dr. Nathan Cole visited, his silver hair disheveled from hours in the lab. The VA is interested in Jack's case, he said. The chemical in the bullet might explain rare conditions in other veterans. We're coordinating with Walter Reed for further study. Sarah felt a spark of purpose. Jack's suffering, her own buried knowledge, could help others. She thought of Mike Delaney, Jack's war buddy, who'd mentioned another soldier, Peterson, lost to a similar growth. How many others carried pieces of war in their bodies, ticking like silent bombs? Jack, now propped up, spoke slowly. If it helps one vet, it's worth it. Sarah squeezed his hand, proud of the man who'd carried so much, yet still found room to give. As Jack's strength returned, so did their conversations, raw, unguarded, about Vietnam. Sarah shared stories of human nights stitching wounds under gunfire, the fear she'd locked away. Jack spoke of the village near Da Nang, the moment he tackled Klein, the guilt of staying silent while others suffered. Their words flowed like a river unblocked, washing away decades of distance. Up a pamphlet. Veterans Reconciliation Program in Vietnam. Thought you and Sarah might want to go. Face the past together. Jack looked at Sarah, his eyes searching. What do you think? She smiled, her heart full. Let's do it, Jack. Let's go back and make peace. The hospital released Jack after 10 days, with strict instructions for rest. Back home in Willow Creek, their 2-story house felt alive again, the peeling white paint a reminder of resilience. Sarah helped Jack settle into his recliner, the Seneca Lake breeze drifting through the open window. Emily stayed for the weekend, her presence a balm to old wounds. As they sat together planning the Vietnam trip, Sarah felt a shift. A marriage once built on love and silence, now grounded in truth. Jack's scar, still healing, was a map of his courage, just as her memories were a testament to her own. They'd survived a war, a secret, and a near-fatal infection, emerging stronger, not just as husband and wife, but as partners in a shared history. Sometimes healing starts when we stop hiding from each other. 6 months later, the July sun bathed Willow Creek in golden light, casting long shadows across the Turners' front porch. Jack, 68 years old, sat in his favorite wicker chair, a glass of iced tea sweating in his hand. The scar on his forearm, now a faded pink line, was a quiet reminder of the bullet fragment that had lived inside him for 44 years. Sarah, 67, joined him, her silver hair glowing in the evening warmth, a matching glass in her hand. Their 2-story home, with its peeling white paint, stood steady behind them, a witness to their renewed bond. The air carried the faint scent of Seneca Lake, a mile away, and the hum of crickets filled the silence. Jack's recovery had been slow but sure. Weeks in the hospital, months of physical therapy, and countless conversations that stitched their past together. Now, as they planned their October trip to Vietnam, a veterans reconciliation program, they felt ready to face what they'd once buried. Inside, their daughter Emily was packing up, her weekend visit drawing to a close. She'd presented Jack's case at a medical conference in Rochester, the unique immune response to the bullet's chemical compounds sparking interest among VA researchers. Jack's suffering had become a beacon, potentially helping thousands of veterans carrying silent relics of war. Sarah watched Jack sip his tea, his broad shoulders relax for the first time in years. "You're looking forward to Vietnam, aren't you?" she asked, her voice soft. 71 mission, the weight of silencing Lieutenant Klein's actions. Sarah spoke of her Red Cross days, the soldiers she'd saved, the ones she'd lost, and the guilt she'd carried for leaving that life behind. Each story peeled back layers of silence, revealing the young people they'd been, scared, resilient, shaped by a war neither had fully escaped. Emily joined them on the porch, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder. "Dad, Mom, I'm proud of you both," she said, her voice warm. "You're not just surviving, you're rewriting your story." Jack smiled, a rare, unguarded grin. "Took us long enough, kid." Sarah laughed, the sound light, healing. The VA had contacted them, confirming Jack's case was part of a broader study on chemical exposures. His testimony about the village incident, shared with a military historian, had added a piece to the Vietnam War's complex puzzle. Sarah felt a quiet pride. Her husband's courage, once hidden, was now a light for others. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Jack turned to Sarah. "We did okay, didn't we? Building this life even with all we carried?" She squeezed his hand, her heart full. "Better than okay, Jack. We found our way back to each other." They sat in silence, the lake's distant rhythm a reminder that some wounds, when shared, could become bridges. Life doesn't always let us choose our scars, but it gives us the chance to choose what we do with them. Jack and Sarah carried pieces of Vietnam, his bullet, her memories, for decades, thinking silence protected their love. It took a crisis to show them that truth, however painful, builds stronger connections than secrets ever could. What's a truth you've held back, afraid it might hurt someone you love? Or a moment you shared it and found healing instead? Share your story below and let us know where you're watching from. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is speak and listen. No wound is too old to heal when we find the courage to speak.